I'm Scott Syverson, and welcome back to another video on Sales Psychology 101. This is a look at how the latest model in science, Paradaptive intelligence, interacts and controls all functionality of the brain during the process of a sale. I want to start off by reminding you that there are two ways to solve problems, or what we call pain points: yourself or relationships. In the last video, we looked at how the brain processes and evaluates solutions presented to them by someone in a relationship. In this video, we're going to examine the relationship side of that two-pronged approach that the brain is programmed to take. Just like how the brain solves and evaluates problems and creates adaptational solutions, relations occur in algorithms. It uses the same machinery. Different algorithms are loaded into that machinery to create and examine and evaluate relationships. There are 9 types of relationships that we've identified so far. Sales only uses 2 of these relationships. It uses a horizontal professional relationship algorithm, and it uses the institutional emotional algorithm. The institutional emotional algorithm is synonymous with the concept of tribe. Institutions are large conglomerates of people or groups of people, and how we associate with them. And just like the other algorithms that we've looked at, these occur in 3 phases. And in particular, in relationships, you have enemy, you have an acquaintance, and you have friendship. And for this video, we're only going to be looking at the last 2, only because we're limited with time and what we can delve into. As mentioned, it uses the same machinery and it functions pretty near much the same way. The only difference is going to be the emotional algorithms that are fed into the mechanism. There's been a discussion about multitasking. What you have to understand is the brain can only do one thing at a time. It can either evaluate a product or a service, or it can work on creating and extending a relationship. It will multitask. It will switch between these 2 functions as you're going through the sales cycle. And as with all the other algorithms, as you satisfy the emotions, the amount of stimulus, the amount of joy that the brain receives escalates, gets higher and higher with each dose. So in this way, we're programmed to seek more and more joy. In this way, we're programmed to develop relationships. And the main mechanism that is providing this is the human action cycle, which will feed through it just like it did in the adaptation emotional algorithm. There's an old adage in sales that says you have to sell yourself first. Again, without the proper definitions and understanding of what the brain is programmed, we sometimes get a drift of what we actually are seeing. When you say we're trying to sell ourselves, actually what we're trying to do is create a relationship. And the biological function of relationships as it pertains to sales is the quality of the relationship determines the quality of the information that the speaker gives. So the stronger relationship you have, the more believable your information is. So as a salesman, it behooves you to develop the strongest possible relationship, meaning that your information will have the highest value. And this will shorten your sales cycle, and this will create greater potential for closing sales. All right, let's start with the horizontal professional emotional algorithm. What defines this particular algorithm is there's no power. He's not your boss, you don't answer to him, and vice versa. The only power that you have is that you can each mutually benefit each other. You can each help each other. That's why it's horizontal. The only power that each party holds is to sully the reputation of the other. So, in essence, there is no power, so you cannot command, you cannot deem, you cannot force anything through. It has to be mutually acceptable. And again, that's something you have to remember, mutually, because you as a salesman have a say in what is mutual. Let me give you an example of trusted relationships. If a stranger comes up to you and says, hey, I got a hot tip for the 5th race at Santa Anita out in California, you're going to probably say, that's great, and keep your money in your pocket. But if your best friend from 30 years comes up to you and says, hey, I got this hot tip, you're more likely to go with that and put some money down on that race because he's your friend, he's trusted, his information has proven good, and that's why he's trusted. So you can see the value of building relationships in a sales call. And through this video and through the algorithms, I'm going to show you exactly the steps in the precise sequence and what it is satisfying for so that you can build relationships faster and create better communication quicker that will help you transmit information to that prospect or client. And this is good for both parties. It is not someone taking advantage of somebody else by knowing what these algorithms are. They need the best information that they can get. And if they can get it from a source they trust, so much the better. Both parties benefit from good communication. The other thing that relations set is it sets tolerances for inconsistencies. If you're slightly inconsistent on something and I don't know you, you're most likely going to back away and say, that's great, move away. But if it's a good friend and he says something and then changes a little bit later on, you're more likely to say, hey, wait a second. What did you mean by that, or how does that apply? So it sets tolerances for inconsistencies. And this is again important because we're humans, we're not perfect. And in a sales cycle, we may misspeak, we may say something that is in error, and you may want to have an opportunity to correct that. This is going to allow you, by developing relationships, to better address those sort of things. We're going to look at emotions of the horizontal professional relationship. And in the first phase, we're going to look at the acquaintance phase. And again, just like in adaptation, there's one line where the emotions go all the way from very low value of joy to very high values of joy with increasing shots of joy. And then in the friendship phase, it starts off in the very intense high joy positions within the spectrum of the amount of joy that the brain can dose out. The first emotion, starting in the middle and working towards the right, is acceptance. What acceptance indicates, and it has a different meaning in relationships, is do you acknowledge that person? Do you accept them as a person? Think about that. How many people do you walk by in a day and you don't even look at, you don't form any eye contact, you don't even try and engage them? You're not acknowledging those people. When you're acknowledging someone in a relationship, you're giving them that contact, giving them that nod, and giving them that praise when you say their name. When you say their name, that's a form of acceptance. The next emotion that you're going to look at is curiosity. And in curiosity, we want to know, what is their backstory? What is their history? What you're trying to do is build points of commonality to build communication upon. So that's what you're looking at in curiosity. Is there something that we have in common, something that I can link to build a relationship on? The next emotion is camaraderie. Camaraderie is when you identify a likeness to another person. Hey, this person and I are alike. We are fellow travelers on the same road. So we're going in the same direction. Now we have that commonality. That's where camaraderie comes in. The next emotion that you will use in forming relationships is attachment. This is now where you take ownership or make a claim upon that person. It signifies that you have a bond with them, that there is a relationship to them, that you're attached to them. And let me demonstrate all that, how that all works, by talking to you about greetings. You can say, hi Scott, hey, that just satisfied acceptance. You might want to say, hi Scott, how's it going? Do you always wonder why you always people have, how things going? That's curiosity. Curiosity doesn't go away. It is always part of the relationship once you've gotten to that point and you've satisfied that emotion. You're always going to be curious about your relationships that you have. Or how about this greeting? Hi Scott, how are we doing? You notice I said acknowledging that person. How are we doing? Not how are you doing? We, showing that there's a connection, that there's a bond. So there you're getting acceptance, curiosity, and camaraderie. Lastly, try this one. Hey buddy, how you doing? Now you're showing your attachment. You're using a familiar. So you're getting acceptance, curiosity, camaraderie, and attachment all in one phrase. Hey buddy, hey pal. How you doing? How's things going? That one little simple greeting shows the 4 different levels of attachment that you have, or where the status of your relationship is. So if you listen very closely, and you will hear from people exactly what your status is. The next phase that we're going to look at is the relationship phase and the horizontal professional emotional algorithm. This is the lower bottom line to the right that contains 4 different emotions. The first is friendship. And in friendship, you seek their company. You just don't randomly bump into them as you would with an acquaintance. This is something that you're going to seek out because it's pleasurable. Again, remember, we can move towards pleasure. We move away from things that are deleterious to us. So this is that part of the subconscious that's starting to move us towards pleasure in friendships. When you satisfy a friendship in the horizontal professional algorithm, what you're saying is you grant access to you. You're looking for them, but you're granting them full access to you as a person. The next emotion in building relationships is compassion. This is the desire to explore their feelings. Up to this point, you've been satisfying yourself and satisfying internal needs. Now your internal need is to know and understand what their emotions and feelings are. So it's a switch from an internal drive to finding out what's going on externally and where their emotions are at. The next motion in this algorithm is grace. Grace means that this is one of the favored relationships among all your relationships. This is the top tier. This is where you need to thank your club, your clique, your posse, your gang, etc. These are your peeps. These are the people who you move with. And then lastly, and again, we got to think about this in business terms, is loyal customer. This is when you get a customer to this point, they are self-actualizing in their relationship with you and you with them. You're satisfying all 6 of the universal needs to the fullest extent possible. And again, 6 universal needs we discussed in a previous video. These are your drivers. These are what move you through life, seeking those 6 specific drives that have to be satisfied. And relationships can satisfy only the last 4 of the 6 universal. Freedom and power satisfies the first 2 emotions on the 6 universal, and only the adaptational algorithm can satisfy those. You have to have power to search for solutions and implement solutions in your world. All right, the next thing that we're going to look at now is the institutional relationship. It works just like what we just discussed. It's being driven by the 6 universal needs. But this has a slightly different organization of emotions that the human action cycle will move through, again, because you're now examining a conglomerate of people. What do these people represent? What do they believe? How do they act? Those are the things that a group, a tribe of people present. Think about it this way. You can't have a friendship with a tribe, but what you can have is a relationship with the tribe. And this works for any aggregate of people, groups, things of that nature. And what I hear most often in the papers and news articles, as well as some of the scientific journals, is the word tribalism. So it's great if you want to associate tribalism with institutional relationships. The difference is, tribalism is kind of this vague, feel-good feeling that we all know what it is because we see it all the time. I like the approach of institutional relationships as institutions being groups of people, because it's much more precise and very thorough in our understanding of what the emotions are that the brain is biologically trying to solve towards a group of people. The only difference in the sequence of emotions is that friendship is replaced with kinship. And kinship is a sense of relatedness. How related to this group of people am I? So acceptance of the tribe is an admittance to the self-identification of the tribe. If you accept that you're one of the tribe, You now belong to their ethos and their behavior patterns and their rules of operation. Otherwise, it's identical to the emotions that you're trying to satisfy as you go through. Now it's time to talk a little bit about the rules of relationships, because there are rules that are very specific to how these emotional algorithms get satisfied. Relationships tend to be synchronous. Not precisely, but they are synchronous. If you're at one level, the other person is most likely going to be at that level also. Again, you've got to remember, you've got that mirror neuron system that's putting their emotions on their face, so you can evaluate if you're there, if you're at that level with them. This is another function of the mirror neuron system, of allowing you to understand in building relationships where you're at. You also have to remember that the bias of the adapter is that it's cooperative. So if someone is at one level of a relationship, there's an inner drive, an inner need to reciprocate that and be cooperative in that relationship. And that becomes important. In just a minute, we'll cover that. I've determined that we can jump approximately 3 emotional levels and not be synchronous. We can be somewhat synchronous. So you may be at one level and someone else may be at a different level. So why does the system allow 3 jumps? It actually turns out to be very, very simple. Someone has got to go first in relationships. What you'll see is, hey, I like you, we're both at the same point. At some point, that person's brain satisfies the emotion that they're working on, and they now go to that next level. So there's a disparity. So nature has built in a buffer that allows people to be one above the other. Now, through the biases of the adapter and the mirror neuron system, this other person is going to be working towards getting up to that level of relationship with that person. So that's why it allows you to go up to 3 emotions beyond that. If you go beyond that, what you'll get is that sense of, something's not right. That guy and I are not on the right page. She's a little too familiar with me. Whatever it may be, we all have had those senses. But that's why you're synchronous. You're usually pretty much in the same ballpark. But it doesn't have to be perfect, because someone has got to go first to get to the next level. And it psychologically puts the pressure on that person to try and solve that emotion so that they too can join you on the next step in building a relationship. Doesn't mean they will. These things can fail all the time, as you very well know. But that's the inner drives that are DNA programmed to drive these relationships forward. And again, it also sets tolerances. The stronger your relationship, the more willing you are to overlook flaws or speech impediments or whatever it may be, off tone notes or in a person. As the relationship gets stronger, your tolerance to overlook any discrepancies also gets much and much larger. Very little tolerance, very low in the relationship, lots of tolerance as you get farther on in the relationship. And as I said before, your DNA programmed to develop relationships. Keep that in mind as you're out there forming relationships in sales. The person sitting across from you is DNA programmed to also develop relationships. They want to do this, so this is not a manipulative practice. They're just as biologically programmed to do this as you are. The better at it you are, by understanding the steps and understanding what you need to do, is going to help you build those relationships much quicker and develop stronger communication, which is always better for both parties. It's a good business practice knowing all these things about relationships, the tolerances, the ability to build communication, to always work at the extreme level of where you're at. And again, it's not manipulative. If you just met somebody and they're an acquaintance, you might want to teach them like they're at the attachment phase. Again, you have the latitude to jump 3. How you doing? Are we doing all right? You can make those forms of attachment. And again, the brain is wired to allow that, and it puts a psychological pressure on them to develop the relationship, to be cooperative, to get to the same level where you're at. In some cases, a third type of relationship other than the horizontal professional emotional tonal algorithm and that for institutions occurs. Sometimes you develop a friendship. My book explains this algorithm, and we're not going to take time to do it here today, but just be aware that you can have 3 different relationships going on with a client. They could be a good friend, they could be looking at you as an institution and you at them as an institution, and most certainly and definitely there will be a horizontal professional relationship that is being in play at this point. And to make it even slightly more complicated, but again, you need to understand all the dynamics that are going on. There can be multiple institutional relationships going on. Think about it this way. That customer that you're calling on has a relationship with you, which is called a horizontal professional, and they may have a relationship with your company. Perhaps they've been doing business with you for 20 years and you've only been calling on for 3 years. They have a relationship with your company. Your company is an institution, so they have a relationship with that. And even more so, if you're selling third-party products, they have a relationship with that brand of third-party products. What we call branding, when you break it down and you get to the scientific nub of it all, branding is nothing more than an institutional relationship. So their advertising by the third party creates an image and has already started working on the institutional relationship at that level. So you've got a lot of relationships that you need to manage. And now that you know the sequence for each one of those relationships and what the brain is trying to satisfy at each level, you can now manage those relationships much more precisely. Well, that concludes my very, very brief introduction to the Paradaptive Intelligence Network. I'm going to show you 2 master graphs that show the adaptation sales cycle and one of the relationships that we just discussed and its full representation, including the 6 universal needs. By doing this, I hope to show you how it all starts to fit together, and that there was lots of information that we left off just due to time, that there's far more for you to know and understand if you're going to be a sales profession and manage all aspects of the business of sales in a professional manner. If you want to be in the top 5% of salespeople, if you want to master this material and thus master the sales profession, you need to buy my book, Sales Psychology 101. Paradaptive Intelligence, the grand unifying theory of adaptation, consumer behavior, and sales. Thank you, and we'll see you.